Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of CakeWaves. CakeWaves. Now, since we have some classic genres coming back in the horror scene, such as Friday the 13th, Halloween, Leatherface.
You mean franchises?
Franchises. What did I say?
You said genres.
Genres. From genre, some franchises coming back. And a lot of independent films that are being announced. We thought we'd talk about what we feel makes a good independent horror film.
Oh yeah. Referencing some new ones that we've seen, and maybe speculating on some that are coming out in the future. But first, we just wanted to talk to you guys real quick about something that we're doing. Speaking of independent horror films.
It's exciting!
Now, as you guys probably already have heard several times, we've talked about it in the past on vlogs and such. We have been wanting to get back into making our short films again, and we are announcing the Cake Drain Shorts.
Woo!
This is not a line of clothing by Cake Drain. These are really short films, like 2 to 5 minutes range. Most of them are probably going to be horror because it's what we love, it's what we know.
We love it.
And we have started pre-production on our first Cake Drain short, and it's called, you want to tell them what the title is, Drake?
The title is Street Lamp.
Oh yeah! I know it sounds like a noir crime thriller. It's not the case.
It is
Hey,
not.
It could be. You don't know. So look out for that coming in the future.
We are super excited for it because this is going back to Cake Drain's roots. This is our, big, push for more, what would you call it? More professional looking work.
Yeah.
And,
We're really focusing on the overall quality and visual storytelling. So
yes.
Not a lot of dialogue. These are little fun, bite-sized horror films. And speaking of, for all of you SoundCloud listeners that may not be familiar with our video work, we're Cake Drain Productions. Go check out our YouTube channel. There is a link on our profile, and there'll be a link in the description of this SoundCloud podcast. And check out our old short films, our old horror short films. They were like, 5 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, they're pretty short. I mean, your TV episode length on some of them, depending on what show you watch. But they're pretty, I think they're pretty high quality, try not to be too biased on that. But for what we had and what we work with, I think it's a really well done. I've had a lot of people say that as well. But I'm super excited. We're going back to our roots with this.
And we're taking it to a whole nother level.
Whole new level.
With these ones. They're going to be scary. They're going to be fun. And hopefully we'll be able to get one out every month or every other month. Something like that whenever we get into kind of the swing of things. But enough promotionals. Now we're going to be talking about indie horror films. Other than our own.
Yes, that's one thing we are hugely supportive of here at Cake Drain. We love the indies. A lot of our favorite horror films are independent horror films. Some of them older. One of ours, which is much older, which is kind of the one that inspired us both, was The Evil Dead.
My favorite horror movie of all time. Independent,
and it really, that sort of film kind of like, we could do something like that. I mean, it, kind of pushes because it was just a bunch of people who love what they do in a cabin, doing what they want to do, and that's kind of our style in a way. We kind of grab the camera and get going. That's the way we started out. But the one thing I want to bring up about that and some of the more current ones is the use of resources. Now that could be makeup design, that could be just the use of budget, it could be, equipment, whatever it may be. If you use those things properly or improperly, really changes what kind of quote-unquote independent horror you're doing.
Oh yeah.
Because, it could be really well made and, be amazing, or it could, sad to say, be, video store, $5, on release day kind of stuff.
Right. And I mean, and just to kind of reiterate what Drake said, independent horror movies are the movies that made us want to make movies. It wasn't necessarily, as much as we love big blockbuster, huge budget studio films, the ones, at least for me personally, for sure, the movies that made me want to make movies were independent because they were made despite limitations. They're awesome despite their circumstance, and so, like Drake said, independent movies have a big potential to be really good if the people behind them really care, they use their budget wisely, and they're really passionate. And then you have, of course, the like you said, the video store crappy independent horror movies where it's just a whole lot of cheesy effects and bad writing and people just making them because they know they can turn over some cash on it. But so that's the two differences that we're going to be talking about today, and kind of what makes good and what makes bad.
Now, the first one I want to bring up, it's somewhat recent. It came out a few years ago. The title kind of sounds like it's one of the lower ends, but it's amazingly well done. That would be Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Woo! This is a really well-made horror film. It does have its comedic elements, but it's kind of a reverse horror film. It's these two redneck guys who end up buying a new summer home out in the middle of the woods, and they're just wanting to go hunting and have a good time, and these teenagers come out on their land and are, they think
Crazy college kids!
a bunch of crazy college kids coming out, and they think they're a bunch of crazy hillbillies because they're a bunch of city kids who don't know what's going on. And there's some really good parts of it. There's some good atmospheric elements, and also towards I don't want to release too much, but the ending is what makes it amazing because it's such a shock, but it's a really good flow of a film and really well done independent horror film.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I love Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I think it is one of my favorite independent horror movies because it's so well made, so well written, and the acting is fantastic. This movie is hilarious. It's a throwback to classic slasher movies. It kind of pays homage to them and kind of pokes fun at them at the same time. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but it still knows where its roots are. Definitely check out this movie. I mean, we're not sponsored by any of the movies that we're going to talk about to talk about them. This is just our candid opinions. So, and I think it's on Netflix. So go and check it out.
I do think it's still on Netflix. If you haven't checked it out yet, it's amazing to check out.
Well, the first independent horror movie that I guess I want to bring up is, or I guess topic. It kind of covers a lot of independent horror movies, especially recently. Is they have a quality of not being really horror movies. And I know that doesn't quite make sense, but hear me out. A lot of recent independent horror movies are classified as horror because of their visual style more so than the actual content or the actual themes or purpose of scaring. They kind of are just a lot of drama that wears a horror face. They're still great movies, but they're not really quite horror movies. And one that comes specifically to mind is A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Now it's a huge indie horror movie. It got a lot of success. Really well made, beautifully shot movie. But once again, it's not really a horror movie. It's not scary for one, which I know. Okay, that's kind of a cheap shot. But the only qualities about it that make it a quote-unquote horror movie is the fact that it has a vampire in it, and it's kind of horror-themed. But, I mean, would you consider Twilight a horror movie? Probably not.
Ouch!
And that wasn't like criticism of Twilight, but just because it has a vampire in it doesn't make it a horror movie, you know? Yeah. So I'm not trying to be overly critical of this movie. I'm just stating that I think a way that filmmakers are starting to sell their quote-unquote independent horror movies is by just adding the horror aspect to them to create a flavor that is more easily received by audiences than just a straight-up drama that's going to bore people. It's like, well, the story, bare bones, is probably going to be boring to people, so what are we going to do? Oh, well, let's just throw a vampire in there, or let's just throw a ghost in there, or something like that.
Let's advertise it as it's a super scary horror film. And
Yeah.
say it's this.
But like I said, I still love the movie. I still think it's a great movie, but it's kind of like Let Me In, or Let the Right One In, the original Swedish version, which was also an independent movie. The Swedish version was anyways. And it's like that, where it's not really a horror movie. It's kind of just a drama that has a vampire in it. So, I don't know. You guys decide. What really makes a movie, specifically independent horror movies, what makes it a horror movie? Is it just the clothes that it wears, or is it a combination of everything?
And with Let Me In, it does have horror elements in it. There are a few scenes that are, like, somewhat scary. In the
American version.
The American version,
yeah. That one's not independent.
It's not independent. But, as a comparison, there is a bit there. But another big thing with independence that has been somewhat of a theme throughout all the while has been anthologies. If it's like Scary or Die, which is a pretty well done anthology film, the VHS series, which we watched recently, and it's really well done. If you haven't seen those, make sure you check those out.
At least the first two.
At least the first one and second one. Because
if you're really bored, then go and check out the third one. But
but they're really well made. They keep their production values in the middle area. I'd say they look they have that found footage to the best way, I think, because it's VHS. It's supposed to be like a VHS type scenario.
And they're really creative.
They're really well done creatively as well. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, like with just going off of that, with a found footage movie, to me, found footage is just a gimmick unless there's a purpose behind it. And the thing that I love about the VHS movies is they figure out new, inventive, creative ways of using found footage, so that it's literally a part of the story and not just a style of cinematography. Because, I mean, some of you probably remember rumors about the latest Friday the 13th. There were rumors back last year that, the new Friday the 13th is going to be found footage. That would have just been awful. And I'm sure that if they'd have done it, fans like us would have all rioted and burned down the studio that it was filmed at, because there wouldn't be a point. It would just be a gimmick. So, I mean, found footage is a huge thing in independent horror movies now, because honestly, it saves a lot of money. If you think about the most successful independent horror movie of all time, Paranormal Activity, it was made found footage because it was super cheap. I mean, the director, Oren Peli, he used his own camera. They filmed in his own house. The movie was made for like $1,000. That's low budget. That's
really low budget.
That's almost as low as like Cake Drain budget.
Almost. We haven't quite gotten to the $1,000 yet, but we're, I think, quality outweighs the cost. But
yeah. The quality speaks for itself.
Yeah.
But, so found footage, it's great. I understand, as a filmmaker, I understand needing to keep the budget as low as possible. And so with found footage, you can cut down on camera costs and spend that money somewhere else. But it needs to be used creatively for a reason, like movies. I don't know if this is independent, but like Unfriended, there's a purpose to that found footage format. It's a part of the story. It's not just, hey, let's just film it found footage just cause.
The concept is interesting to me personally, because it's filmed as a online video chat, like a mass Skype call, like from what I've seen, the entire film is a video call.
Right.
And that's a different concept because we've seen movies that used like webcams for different things, or like, different like handheld cameras. But this is like from in front of a computer perspective.
Yeah.
It's like you're part of the experience.
And not just that, they tie that into the story. It's not just on a computer just because.
Yeah.
It's on there because, a lot of the themes and the whole story revolves around social media. Mm-hmm. So whenever it comes to that type of thing, make sure that there is a point other than just, oh, it's cool, oh, it's cheap, or let's just do found footage because it's more effective or whatever.
And one of the stereotypes that goes with independent horror films, because a lot of people hear the term independent horror films and they'll kind of
furrow their brow
and snub their nose and be like, oh, this blah blah blah. One of the stereotypes that I think you need to watch out for has to do with acting, because there's a lot of independent horror films that had a really great concept and had a great push for it, but the acting in it killed it.
Yes.
And I'm not trying to make a be all devil's advocate, but that does make or break film. If your characters aren't portrayed as real, I don't care how real you write a character. If they can't portray that as real or be in their situation and make it real, it doesn't sell it very well. And that's kind of a negative thing that independents have gotten a reputation for. Yeah, because that's kind of what the mass of people think of, because they've seen these dollar movies from the local video rental place, with names like the slasher from down the lane, like the such and such slasher, the such and such
Trailer Park Drill Killer 3.
And it's people see those and they're like, oh, that's what independent horror is, or that's what horror films they think of. But the really well-made ones, they may be kind of few and far between, but the ones that you've kind of got to search for them. But once you find those, or even talk to people who are experienced, or listen to our podcast, and you'll know what to look for in those movies. And I think that's a really good. That's one thing that independents have going against them, but I think that could be a great push because they are improving on that aspect as well.
Yeah, and luckily, I mean, just being completely honest, in today's kind of world, there are more good independent horror movies that come out than there are studio horror movies.
Very true.
Which is kind of a big switch from like the 80s and 90s. You had these huge studio franchises: Friday the 13th, Halloween, Scream, Nightmare on Elm Street, all these really big franchises. I mean, that are starting to make kind of a comeback. But really, I think the heart of the horror genre right now lies in independent scene. And like Drake was saying, I mean, they get a bad rap. A lot of people think independent movies in general, they think like Sci-Fi Channel quality, which is funny because those aren't independent.
Those are actually big budget.
They're studio. Well, they're not necessarily big budget, but they're studio funded. And so people think, oh, Sci-Fi Channel originals. But really, there are a lot of good independent horror movies. And even more so, there's a lot of good independent horror movies on Netflix. Mm-hmm. And other video-on-demand formats, because you just don't get to see them a lot of times in theaters unless you live in LA or you have a theater that shows indie movies. Luckily, we do have a theater here in Springfield that shows horror movies independent movies. Which is cool. So try to find, if you're in that area, try to find an art house theater where you can see not necessarily indie art house films, because they'll just hurt your brain, but it's where you can see good independent horror movies, man.
Very true.
You gotta support the indies.
And and a lot of, like Ian was saying, with the franchises, I think that's a great thing, but also could also be a downfall for mainstream horror, because that is a way to fall back and rest on your laurels, because what would people rather go see? with their selection of movies. Would you rather see, a movie by such and such that, the horror site talks about, that's kind of its own thing, or would you go see the next, I'm excited for this film, but the next Friday the 13th and see Jason doing what he does best? It does kind of, it's a big draw, but you've also, but it kind of hinders the creativity behind it. I think it shows a lack of creativity. Not that I'm kind of saying it without being too negative about it, because I do love these franchises.
Yeah.
But you've also got to leave room for, creativity with your subject matter as well.
Yeah. And with any studio production, there is some level of creative control by the studio, on the part of the studio. And so that kind of, sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's a bad thing. I mean, in cases where it's a good thing, it's like with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it helps to keep a cohesion to the overall franchise. Mm-hmm. But also that can suppress a lot of original ideas if you have executives and studios with a certain agenda that are conflicting with the filmmakers. And so the indie scene is really one of the most creative scenes of cinema. You're going to see, that's why you get such a huge range of quality. You have like really, really good stuff, and you have really, really bad stuff, and then you have really, really weird stuff.
Very weird.
The art house type of movies that don't make any sense.
As an example, we watched one recently called Rubber. This has become a kind of a more well-known indie horror weird
It's
movie.
not a horror movie.
It's not a horror film. They advertise it as a horror film. It's not. It's kind of a very artsy kind of film that they tried to put a horror label on. But in the end of it, it kind of makes your brain hurt, and you wonder what happened to your time.
Well, and I kind of understand some of the subject matter that they were dealing with, and surprisingly, I know we may get a lot of hate for this, but a lot of people really enjoyed that movie, and I did not, because I felt like it was very... it was a very cocky film.
I
agree. Was very impressed with itself, and I didn't like that aspect of it. I think movies should be kind of indifferent about their own position. I mean, you should feel like the filmmakers were passionate about what they were making. Like Christopher Nolan, a quote from him is, whenever he watches a movie, he wants to feel like the people who made it made the best movie that they could possibly make. And I'm the same way. With Rubber, it just felt like the director and the creators behind it were just so satisfied with themselves, like, oh, we're so witty, our movie is so smart and witty and original, and I thought that it was just presumptuous and kind of douchey.
Yeah, to put it bluntly.
Yeah, I did not like that movie at all. So, but I mean, that's just our opinion. And so with independents and, specifically independent horror movies, you can have the range from the movies that I was talking about at first, the movies that aren't really horror movies, they're more focused on the dramatic elements and the subtextual elements and themes, all the way down to the movies that are not trying to make any kind of statement, don't have any kind of purpose other than just bad use of makeup effects, like splattering guts at the screen. That's the name of the movie, too. Splattering Guts at the Screen
Guts.
2 in space. And so I like the ones that are in the middle, where they have a good theme, they have a good solid message, but they also are scary, or at least trying to be. And they're really atmospheric and stuff, so...
And, you may be lucky and find ones that are in the middle that are between that line of being, like, scary and stuff like that, but also being a little goofy with that. One example that I love personally is a movie called Slashers. It came out mid-2000s-ish. It's basically about a Japanese reality show where these 3 masked killers try to kill off these 6 American contestants. It's a really well made, it was very low budget, but I think with the actors they chose and with the way they made it, it made it more real, and the idea the theming around it made that feel more acceptable because it was a pseudo reality show
Yeah, it had
aspect,
that,
very
that over the
independent
top.
film.
That over the top aspect didn't take itself too seriously because we all know that Japanese game shows are kind of crazy.
They're crazy. But the killers were very well done because not only were they their own identities, but they also had, each one had like a theme. There's Chainsaw Charlie, who's kind of the crazy redneck, the crazy goofy redneck. Preacher Man, who's your stereotypical southern preacher who believes everybody's going down to hell.
Fire and brimstone.
Fire and brimstone. And then they have Dr. Ripper, the psycho surgeon doctor, who, I mean, if you've been to the doctor's office, it's always, unless you really know your doctor, it's a very creepy experience for anybody. But
The doctor will see you now.
they're very entertaining characters, but at the same time, you're able to have that horror aspect of, it was portrayed to the fact that this felt very real. And I liked that aspect of it because the actors really did their best to make the movie the best it could be. And that does give a chance to give a shout out because this was a Canadian made movie. So give a shout out to our Canadian bro D-Rock. Make sure you head out and check out his podcast.
D-Rock, if you're listening, you need to go watch all the Canadian horror movies that you can.
Yes.
Okay.
And then let us know which ones we should check out if we haven't seen them already.
Independent Canadian horror movie, Cube. I won't talk about this one because it's not recent.
It's not as recent.
Hey, there you go.
Yep.
But going back kind of full circle to what Drake started out with, talking about use of budget. This is really, really important in the independent scene. For any of you that have made videos or short films that might be like us, you know that you have to be very smart with how you use what you have. Because chances are you don't have a lot. And so a lot of indie films, I think, screw up their their use of budget. They slack on getting the right equipment or the right production design or costuming and stuff, and they blow all their money on really crappy makeup effects and gore and stuff.
Or it could be, they blow all their money on like equipment and stuff like that, and then they end up with very cheaply made effects and things like that.
Right, because I think it's better to have really good effects in a bad camera than really bad effects in a good camera, so you can see all of that crappiness in 4K.
Because with a bad camera, you can hide certain things. You can make whatever look amazing.
Make it look old school.
But if you have a really good camera and really bad effects, you're going to see all the details on that.
Yeah, you're going to see the zipper on the back of the creature.
Yeah. Going back to the 70s horror with that one there. But again, if you get a chance, we also, we're not knocking these sillier independent horror films because we do enjoy watching some of those. If you're, because they're fun to watch. They're very fun to, kind of get into, but there is a fine line between entertainingly stupid and just plain stupid.
And I think it also has to do with intention. Like, is
Very
this
true.
intentionally goofy and over the top, or is this just really bad, it's making us laugh?
Yeah.
Because, like, we recently watched, Wolf Cop, and that's good because it doesn't take itself too seriously. The goofiness is on purpose. It's not like, we're trying to make a serious horror movie here about a cop that becomes a werewolf and is really strong because he drinks alcohol and he's cleaning up the streets of these occultists and stuff. But we're serious, okay?
It's very serious.
This is a serious movie. Stop smiling. Stop it. Stop it. No, they knew it was goofy. The whole purpose was to be goofy, and so that's great. That's good. They accomplished it. It's fun.
And I think that's kind of the thing you've got to go into with independent horror films is if you're going to make something independently, don't go into it with the the passion for it. Don't go into it being too serious about it. Because one, it's going to stress you out way too much about a film, and two, it detracts from the actual product. Because if you're focusing too much on, this is going to be our cinematic masterpiece, it's the Citizen Kane of independent horror on an iPhone, you're not going to get the right atmosphere.
Yeah.
The way
Have fun with it.
Yeah, because that's what we love to do with our movies because it's fun. We do these because, yes, we're very serious whenever the camera's rolling and whenever we have to do certain things, but most of the time we're all goofing around, even talking about other horror films that inspired what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So, make it a fun thing. You do it with your friends if you're able to, if they're willing to be bossed around by you, and take ideas from people because they may have a really good idea that you didn't think of, because that's usually the best way to get through a project is to work as a team and make this everyone's film that just happened to be directed by one person.
Yeah. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say it. Horror movies, the horror genre is probably the most fun genre to make movies at.
Very true.
Even if it is a serious horror movie that you're making, it can still be very fun, And there'll be stressful times, and there'll be difficult times, because actors get worn out, and everybody gets worn out and tired and covered in sticky, gooey blood stuff, and they just want to go home and eat a taco. But they can't, and they have to stay and do the same shot 15 more times. But at the end of the day, everybody's like, that was a lot of fun. I'm tired, but that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, if anything...
I got my head cut off. It was great.
It was great. We got to run through a field with a chainsaw. Who doesn't love doing that?
Right?
I mean, we haven't pulled out the chainsaw as of yet, but, we make creative use of weaponry in our films. But I hope you guys have enjoyed our POV on independent horror films. If there's any that we didn't mention or certain aspects that you guys think is important, post them in the comments or tweet us at CakeDrain using hashtag CakeWaves.
Yeah, tell us all about your favorite independent horror movies.
We'd love to hear back from you guys. We may even quote you on the next podcast and share your insight on that as well. And if you guys haven't checked it out already, check out our buddy D-Rock here on SoundCloud. I've already mentioned him, but his podcast is titled hashtag DRWTO, all capital letters, where he talks about all things wrestling and anything that's just on his mind. Make sure you give him a shout out, tell him Cake Drain sent you, because he inspired us, so we love to give him a shout out as well.
Oh yeah, and we will see you Monday on the Cake Drain Show on YouTube, and we will be speaking into your ear hole, riding the cake waves next Friday. Alrighty, guys?
All right. Peace out, and remember,